Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to see so many people. Um, so my name is Kim Coles, and I am a manager in our academic liaison team, so our subject librarian team at the University of Reading. And my role with the Talis is advocating to academic staff and trying to sort of understand how we can get academic colleagues to kind of engage with Talis a little bit. So I'm also joined today by my colleague Ian. Did you want to introduce yourself, Ian?
Yes, hi everyone, Ian Chilvers. I'm the library systems administrator in the library, which my primary role is managing, developing the library management system, but where we have other systems like Talis, which are critical to library operation, I am brought in to help with like the technical side of things. So I've been doing this now for about 5, 6 years, I think, maybe a bit longer. So yes, lots of experience with Talis.
Yes, so we wanted to just run through our rollover workflow, which we've been working on for a number of years now. I think Ian and I have been working on this. I think it might be 8 years now. We've been working on Talis in some form together. So we've been working on our processes for a little while, and we just wanted to take you through some of that stuff in case there's anything we can share, and also to ask you some questions at the end about your rollover workflows, hoping we can learn some things from the group as well. So the standard kind of contextual slide about the university. So the University of Reading is based in the centre of Reading. We have two small campuses in Reading, but we also have a number of overseas campuses, 27,000 students in total. We've been using Talis at the university since around 2015-16, so it slightly predates our experience with Talis, I think, but we also use digitized content. So we have the reading lists side, and we also have the scans and the digitized content side as well. Our Talis use is limited to courses that are delivered here in the UK. So our overseas campuses, while they can still access some of our e-resources, they don't have access to Talis in the same way. So I thought it was just probably useful to set that out from the start. And also just to give you a bit of background on how we use Talis. So academic staff mostly create their own lists. They are responsible for creating their own lists. There are some academic liaison librarians who will support, and we're there to support the training and creation of lists, but I know that on the whole it's an academic staff endeavour. We're trying to encourage academics to take ownership for their lists. We use the Blackboard LTI linking to link lists within Blackboard courses without too much intervention from academics or library staff. So that's been a semi-recent change with the LTI 1.3, so that's those lists are being surfaced through Blackboard where students are looking for them, but we'll come on to how that affects rollover a bit later on. And our acquisitions team, our collections team within the library review the list. So we use reviews when an academic colleague publishes the list. It then goes for review, and our acquisitions team will check what's on the list, look at our purchasing process and our purchasing workflows to make sure that we have enough content, either ebook or in print, and refer back to the liaison librarians to speak to academic colleagues if there are any questions about that. The final thing on my slide is our sort of library Talis group. So within the library, there are a few of us who have some kind of responsibility for Talis. So my responsibility sits with working with my liaison team and the academics in terms of understanding, getting them to understand how to use the system and how to make requests and let us know what they would like in the library. Obviously, our collections team are heavily involved in purchasing that material and reviewing, checking links. And Ian is obviously very heavily involved in terms of kind of his system support. So we decided it would be sensible to have a monthly meeting where 3 or 4 of us, so myself and Ian, our two collections colleagues who couldn't join us today, to meet to talk about Talis issues. So there'll be lots of different things from various different areas, and it's just a chance for us to kind of keep in touch and sort of introduce things together. So it's a joint effort, really. It doesn't sit within one team, which is why it's useful to have this Talis group. Also, our rollover takes place in June, so we're sort of going through the prep now. We're aiming to roll over at the end of the month, and then our digitised content rollover takes place in July. So we actually slightly work backwards from the TADC rollover in order to make sure that we've got everything kind of lined up. So yeah, prep starts fairly early on. So I think, can I have the next slide, please? Should I be able to do that?
You should build the next slide. No?
Should be able to, no. Thanks. So why did we want to improve our rollover processes? So we've gone through various iterations, but what we're trying to land on is a clear process that we've documented that we could kind of work through once as thoroughly as possible and get as much done. So I mentioned that we're sort of working back from August in terms of the CLA annual checks, thinking about getting our digitised content rollover done in July so that everything's ready, which means we need our reading list rollover ready in June, so that we can have the lists ready, we know what modules are running, then we know which scans we need to roll over. We didn't want to do multiple rollovers, and we wanted to be able to manage this between this sort of small Talis group with all of us kind of speaking to our relevant teams and deal with issues as they arose, rather than having to do multiple iterations of things. We have a big rollover document that's a living document which we review each year, and then we work through as we go to note issues. Things do pop up, and things we can improve for next year. So then we'll review and see how we go with that. And we wanted to sort of deal with things that come up. So lists that have been copied by academics in advance of rollover or midpoint through the year that we didn't realise were there. Unpublished changes that have been sat there for sometimes a couple of days, sometimes a couple of months. And we also have various modules which sometimes alternate years and things like that. So we used to have a system where we would email one another around about these sorts of different areas, but actually what we're trying to do is put as much of this into one process as possible. So we have a series of checks that we go through and a series of stages that we're aiming to get met before we move on to the next one. One big thing was our digitised content rollover accuracy. So because we're doing our reading list rollover first, we can then only roll over digitisation requests that we actually need. This was trickier. Quite a few years ago, we weren't quite sure what we needed. We didn't know which lists were going to be required for next year sometimes. And in some cases, we rolled over lists and digitised items that we didn't actually need and had to kind of unpick that after the event. So hopefully this way we're rolling over everything we need. Another potential thing we're removing is unnecessary reviews by the collections team. So we roll over our lists published to published, which means that an academic colleague has to go in and then re-request by publishing in order to have that list reviewed. We did go through a stage of rolling over to draft, so that academics had to go in, and I think in practice we found that academic liaison librarians were going in and publishing those in advance of the academic year, so that didn't really do what we wanted it to do, and hopefully this means everything that comes in is something that the collections team need to work through and they're not trying to work it out via email or over some other means. We wanted to have a way of making our student numbers as accurate as we could without updating them really frequently. So trying to find a point in the year, and Ian will talk a little bit about how we kind of gather our information and make our student numbers as accurate as we can. And another key thing was trying to keep previous lists for resits. So we retain access to our previous lists. We do roll over, and we do need to roll over for that reason so that we have last year's list and this year's list. And it is on the slide, but it's last on my notes, but understanding module to reading list ratios. So do we actually have the reading lists for the modules that are running, and how many modules that we know about have a reading list? Can we use this to speak to our academic schools and departments as well? So that's a long-term aim, but we're hoping that by updating a hierarchy each year, we're not just relying on spreadsheets for that. Talis is the source of truth, hopefully. Okay, I think that's the rationale. So things that we wanted to achieve, principles that we want to work to when we are doing our rollover. Only academic lists are assigned a time period, which means that we only roll over the academic lists. We have some generic lists, so we'll have some for some of our teacher training. We'll have lists that a school might put together to provide examples of different resources that their colleagues could choose from for their lists. We have library training lists. They don't get time periods, and they don't get caught up in rollover. In the same way, academic lists must be attached to a module node within the hierarchy. So these generic lists are attached to a program or a unit or a department like the library, for example. And that means that when we're rolling over, we can select everything that's attached to a module node and roll that over. And we're not picking up things that don't need to be rolled over accidentally as well. We were aiming not to have exceptions within the process. So everything should somehow be accounted for. All of these academic modules, all these lists are attached to modules, all the training lists are attached to a different unit or department. There are some exceptions due to some of the way that some of the modules are taught, particularly on our teacher training program. The way that they use the lists, the way that they structure their modules might mean that there are multiple academic colleagues contributing to a module on different subject areas of teaching, and therefore each subject area has its own module. This means that they do, unfortunately, have a spreadsheet that is used, but we're trying to limit the number of spreadsheets that we're using that sit outside of Talis. But it's still done, so we still have those. So yeah, that was the thing. We didn't want to track everything on spreadsheets, but there are some processes that we don't have a way of managing currently, so that's what we're working on. Okay, I think I'm handing over to Ian
now. Yes. So I'm going to talk you through the stages of our rollover, from preparation all the way through to the rollover and then post-rollover processes. Kim mentioned our big rollover document. I should have it somewhere here. Yeah, this is our living document, just to give you an idea of everything that we have listed. Lots of comments there, and we'll, whose responsibility for each sort of stage of that. So during our kind of first rollover meeting of the year, which is towards the end of April, early May, we'll go through that document, discuss any changes that we're aware of that might affect the rollover process, and confirm or decide on dates for when we want to do the rollover. As Kim said, we'll have 2 weeks in June for the the reading list rollover. One's a prep week, the other is the rollover week, and then we'll have 2 weeks in typically end of June, July for the digitized content. Again, first week will be a prep week, second week will be the rollover week. Once we have all those dates, obviously we'll communicate those with library staff, and we'll let Talis support know what we're up to, and of course request all our new time periods. We use 4 time periods. One is a whole session time period, then we've got time periods for semester 1, semester 2, and then summer lists. So the first thing we like to do is kind of clean up the current year's lists. Our colleague Nikki in collections typically does this throughout the year, so there's actually very little to do at this point. But we like to keep things nice and tidy, so we'll get rid of any draft lists on needed. Lists with unpublished changes we'll publish. Lists with 0 items will be deleted. Sort out duplicate lists. The big one here is lists not attached to the hierarchy. So as Kim said, academic lists should be attached to a hierarchy module node. So we will use the all list report for lists in the current time periods that aren't attached to the hierarchy, and we'll go in and attach those to the appropriate node, or if for whatever reason one doesn't exist, we'll make sure it gets created and then attach the list to that node. Having lists attached to the hierarchy nodes is important, and they won't get rolled over if they're not. And then, just because we like to keep track of things, we'll run a series of end of year reports just so we've got a snapshot of what our year looked like. just before rollover. One of the major aspects of our rollover process is our hierarchy update. So we'll take module data from the Talis hierarchy snapshot and from our SITS module report, and we will bring that data together using an Excel VBA script, which will create one of 4 hierarchy upload files that we need. One for deleted modules, one for add-in modules, one for updating the parent nodes in the Talis hierarchy, and then one for updating all of the nodes' student numbers. I've got an asterisk against the deleted modules here. That is probably one of the more important ones, because what that does, if you delete a hierarchy node on a reading list, that is attached to a reading list, you will, what Talis calls, orphan that reading list. So it will no longer have a hierarchy node attached to it. And we use that exact piece of functionality to help us select or identify the lists that we don't want to roll over. And we do that in the next step. But we're very happy to orphan reading lists at this stage, and that's part of the process. Bulk add-in modules is useful for updating parent nodes. The student numbers, again, very important. We're trying to get as accurate student numbers onto our lists as possible, and by uploading them to the hierarchy nodes, we can at a later stage update all the student numbers on all of our rolled over lists. And as Kim said, there are some exceptions, and those kind of education, teacher training modules are removed from this process, and same for pre-sessional modules, which are run over the summer, where we'll do a separate mini rollover just for those, typically in September. So once we've run our hierarchy update, which as you're probably aware, can take a few days or so to actually go through the dry run and then actually apply all the changes. We will then work through a few more series of steps to update modules where we know that there is a module code or a module name change. Our liaison librarians will add these to a list, a Microsoft list, and we'll use those and roll those over individually, and at that point change the code, change the name, or if the lists are being merged or split, we'll do whatever processes we need to do for those. And we'll also ensure that all of our reviews have been completed and eventually archived, so that when our collection teams go in and start on the reviews again, following the rollover, and when they come through, they'll just have a blank slate to start from and can start prioritizing properly. So the list cleanup 2 is the main bit of work here as well, following the hierarchy update. So I mentioned the orphan lists. We'll use the all list report to identify lists on current time periods that have no hierarchy, are not attached to the hierarchy, and we'll just bulk archive all of those lists, which means they won't get rolled over. Kim mentioned managing copied lists. These, blessedly, we don't get as many of these anymore. We used to get quite a lot of academics copying lists for the following year, and we'd have to go back to them and say, no, it's okay. If you need it now, just talk to us, because we can roll over your list early if you really need it for the following year. So another part of the process is where we've rolled over lists early, we'll go and archive and attach the previous year's lists from hierarchy. Not that they would roll over, but again, it's just keeping things tidy and clean. If they're archived and detached from hierarchy, we know that they've been dealt with. So the actual first stage of the second week of the reading list rollover is rollover itself. Probably the simplest part of this whole process, because we simply use the rollover tool in Talis. For each time period that we have, we'll roll them over to the following year's time period, and we publish. We roll over to published, and we archive all the old lists and detach them from the hierarchy. So that is done. That's very much a simple thing. Just waiting for the rollover processes to complete is the big part of that. The next bit, the post-rollover bit, is where we're a bit more involved again. So there is, we have a spreadsheet which we keep a list of modules that run irregularly or in alternating years. So we'll go in and we'll find, if we know that a module is going to run in the next academic year, we'll go in and find the archive list for that, copy it, and set it up for the next year. Our collections team at this point will go through their new edition spreadsheet and work out where they need to update items on lists to the new edition. And the other thing we do after this is to communicate to module conveners, which we used to do directly with them, but now we are using our VLE team's mailing list to get that communication out to our module conveners to let them know that their reading list for the following year is now available for them to go and update and review and all that good stuff. Not that they do until about mid-September, but yeah, there it is. So everything we've done up till now has been either using the Talis reports that are available, or in the case of the hierarchy, a script that we've written in Excel to handle that. At this point, we additionally use the Talis community bulk tools to do a few extra things. And these are actually tools using the Talis API that we wrote in order to facilitate this part of our rollover process. So the big one here is resetting student numbers on lists. Now, when you update the student numbers on hierarchy nodes, that number just sits on the node itself. It doesn't automatically feed through to a reading list. What this tool does is you feed it all the list IDs that you want to update, and basically what it does is it detaches that list from the hierarchy and then immediately reattaches it to all the nodes, or just the node that they were attached to. And that process actually pulls through the new student numbers that are on the node onto the list itself. So you can do this manually. You can go through to on each reading list and detach, remove the hierarchy nodes, and then add them back in. It will do the same thing. Obviously, that's a much longer process. What this tool does is automates that for us. And then the other thing we do is updating list details. So our SITS module data will tell us when a module is going to run, whether that's for the whole session or in particular semesters. So we'll translate that into our time periods, and we use one of the tools in the community bulk tools to update the time periods on all the lists automatically. We used to do the same for list owners, but whilst the SITS module data that we get in June is relatively accurate, we found that list convener information was probably the least accurate information in there, and we often found that we were just putting the wrong owners onto lists at this point. And another side effect is where contributors have been added to lists. Those get removed at this point as well if we use this tool. So we've stopped updating list owners and sort of relying on academics to add themselves, or on our academic liaison team to do that where necessary. The third thing we do is we add a item resource into the top of every list that doesn't already have it. Basically, it's effectively like an advert for our library alternative format service. providing accessible copies for students, and that's at the top of the list. So obviously, they see that first. So if there's someone who would benefit from that service, they can access that. And then because we like things being neat and tidy, we consolidate all of our old time periods. So what this means is all of the previous year's lists that were on semester 1 or semester 2, we update their time period to be a whole session time period, because at this point we don't really care which semester the reading list was run in. We just care which academic year it was for. So once we've moved all those onto one time period, we ask Talis to delete the time periods we no longer need. And because we've been doing this since about 2015, we had a lot of time periods. So it's very useful to get rid of some of those from our all list filter, time period filter. So we just have the academic year filter for that now. So that is basically the end of the rollover process, except when we get into the autumn. So end of October, beginning of November, we'll do that hierarchy update again, this time using more accurate module data from SITs. We won't delete any modules at this point, but we will add update parent nodes, and again we'll update the student numbers, which necessitates that we use the community bulk tool to reset student numbers of lists once again. And that doesn't take very long at all, a day or two, depending on how long it takes for the hierarchy update to run. So that's basically the two points of the year that we update the student numbers, just before rollover, and again once the data that the university has is much more accurate. And then once all of that is over, we move on to the digitized content. So again, over 2 weeks. The first week is a lot of tidying up tasks. So we'll clear all of our TADSI rollover queue jobs. We'll clear all the referred requests, because we're about to create a whole bunch more for the forthcoming year. We'll bookmark the TADSI rollovers in our browsers. And then the big task is used to do was just select everything and roll it over. But as Kim said, we only want to really roll over things that are going to be needed in the following year. So we create the spreadsheet which matches lists from a Talis or list report that have been rolled over to a TADSI requests report or course report, and basically we're trying to match the lists to the list codes to the course codes. So I will go through that now. So we've got two worksheets here, one for the reading lists, one for the courses. And if I just clear the filter from this, so these are all the lists that we rolled over last year, and where it is highlighted green using conditional formatting, that has matched that code to the course list here. So we can obviously filter everything out that doesn't have a course. So now we have a list of everything that has got a scan request, at least one request in our list attached. And so when it comes to actually rolling these over in the following week, this is where it might seem like we've taken a step back, but we roll these all over individually. So we'll split this spreadsheet up between 2 or 3 of us, and then over a course of 2 to 3 mornings or afternoons, whichever we prefer, we'll put some music on, we'll listen to a podcast, and we'll just go through each of these course codes, plug them into the Talis rollover tool, and edit and pre-clear all of these courses individually. The benefit of that is we're only rolling over scans that will be needed in the following year. And we can also update the student numbers for each of these courses, which of course we've updated as part of our reading list rollover processes. And if we scroll down, we'll see that occasionally, for whatever reason, a module which should appear in the course details for these scans isn't included in the information. So this reading list here, research dissertation, it has got it is attached to 3 hierarchy nodes, 3 modules, but only 2 of them appear in the course details for our scans. So what we do is when we edit and pre-clear, we'll update student numbers on these 2 courses, PLM, RD, and the other. And then we'll also add the one that isn't included in the course details as well as the student numbers for that. And that is essentially our Talis digitized content rollover process. As I said, it's 2 to 3 days, 2 to 3 mornings, afternoons, whichever, 2 or 3 of us going through a number of scans. In fact, how many do we got here? 348. So about 110 each. It doesn't take long.
Sorry, Ian.
And that. Yes.
You were breaking up a little bit then, and I think it broke up a little bit on that slide as well, a bit earlier on. But you were just showing us the spreadsheet and saying how long it takes to get through.
Not too long. Well, you've done it, Kim. Like you used to, you did this. Well, not last year because you weren't with us last year,
No.
but before. It doesn't take very long. Once you get in the swing of things.
And it is more accurate, which I think is the thing we wanted. But we'd had a couple of near misses in the past where we've rolled things over that we didn't need, or some things might have accidentally rolled over a couple of times because things weren't done in the order that we now do them in. So although it's a lot of clicking, and like Ian said, it's a lot of kind of, we are technically re-requesting them, it's actually okay if you split the job up. And because we plan in advance the weeks we're going to do this in, we can kind of set aside a little bit of time on those days in those weeks to kind of go, okay, now like Ian said, I'm going to put a podcast on and I'm going to do a lot of clicking and I'm going to get these done because we've done the prep, so we know what we need to do.
Yeah, and by doing that, we get, of course, this generates a lot of referred requests because it can't match or can't find, the copyright or whatever for the request. So it gives our collections team 6 weeks before we really start needing the scans at the beginning of September. 6 weeks to go through and deal with all the referred requests. So that really helps them out, especially when they need to start ordering at the start of August as well for the forthcoming academic year. Okay, back to you, Kim.
Thanks. So that's our process that we've been working on for the last few years to try to get it as thorough as we can in one go. We would be really interested to know how it compares to your rollover, what processes you're going through. I'd love to know how anybody updates student numbers. So we didn't touch on it, I think, in this, but actually we did do an exercise, Ian can probably explain better than I can, to sort of look at if we're updating the student numbers using last year's figures. We were concerned that wasn't going to be accurate, and we were going to have to wait every time for October, November when the student numbers are finalised. But actually, Ian did some work to analysed the differences in student numbers, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of found that they don't, last year's student numbers are the best predictor for this year's student numbers for those modules that we are rolling over and that are running again. So actually we could get that information in the system over the summer early on, but for new modules, first year modules, master's modules, that extra thing that we do in the autumn is again another one shot, but it gets us closer to being more accurate.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, the hierarchy script in Excel, when it's updating student numbers, if the number that's in our SITS module data is 0 students, and we have a non-zero number from our Talis hierarchy snapshot, that will not overwrite the student numbers that's already in Talis, for the very reason that Kim just said, is that we'd rather have last year's student numbers than a 0 at that point, because that number is probably more accurate than 0.
I'm always interested in how other people do this. And modules without reading list, that's always an interesting one for us. Again, we now update the hierarchy, so we have all the modules in there, and I personally work on the assumption that if it's a module, then somebody is probably recommending a reading somewhere. There isn't really a rule. We used to try to take up dissertations and field trips and things like that, but actually we found that there isn't really a rule. Some field trips recommend readings, some dissertations don't, and vice versa. So actually, for the purposes of our figures, that seems to work. And yeah, if there's anything you would like to share, we'd love to hear in the chat or on the mic if there's anything you wanted to ask or to share about how your process works. We'd love to learn from that and add it, hopefully. We did have a question on here at one point that was, are we overthinking this? Have we? We got quite a lot going on, but actually, hopefully the rationale helps to explain a little bit why we're doing what we're doing, and how we can try to kind of keep things sensible. We only want to do this once and then a mini one for the summer modules. So just making sure everything's documented means we can pick it back up again. I'll pause and have a drink in case there's some typing, but I know there is a question, so I will get back to it. Hey, there was a question in the chat earlier on from John. Do we have a reading list policy, and how do we enforce it in terms of academic engagement? Which is a very good question. Ian is smiling because no, we don't have a reading list policy, and we can't enforce it. So we encourage our academic colleagues to use Talis. It's not the only way they can request items. I know that some institutions have gone down that route where you can't request an item from the library unless it's on a Talis reading list. In our information that we provide to new staff, we do try to make it as clear as possible that the Talis reading list is the way that we know what you would like your students to read. So not only does it provide a list for students that they can then access, but it also helps us in the library understand what we need to purchase for how many students. And if they were to upload that to Blackboard using a Word document, we simply wouldn't know. And that would affect, obviously, their students and their student satisfaction. So academics can email us to request, but we will always, within my team, in the academic liaison team, kind of direct them towards Talis, ask them questions about the module, and kind of recommend that, the module is there set up. We could easily set up a list for them and give them a hand. So we used to run training in a group format. I'm thinking about revisiting it, but actually in the team, we tend to email our academic colleagues when we see that they've joined the university, and we get in touch with them. And this is one of the things that we encourage them to do, is to understand how Talis works, and we'll sit down and get the bookmarking extension installed and things like that. I know that some readings are on Blackboard, and I know that some academic colleagues are using both, or sometimes just Blackboard, but that's how we try to address it. And actually, we are very lucky. We work with our technology enhanced learning team, our VLE team, and they also push Talis in them training and marketing materials as sort of as you're updating your Blackboard course, have you updated your Talis reading list? And here's who you talk to if you're not sure how to do it. So not only do they send out some communications for us, but we work together on training. So if they're explaining things to academics about how to get started with Blackboard, they will also include how to get started with Talis and direct them in our direction. So hopefully we're picking up new colleagues that way. So it slightly touches on the question in the chat, Julie, about academic staff and induction. There are inductions, but we try in the liaison team to individually contact academics to let them know how they request items and what we can do to help and things like that. So that's how Talis is included.
They still, sorry, Kim, they're still running the academic practice program for newer academic staff, because
that's a
Talis
good point.
is sort of part of that program as well. So it is made clear that it's pedagogically the best way that we have to get reading lists out, and hopefully they listen.
Yes. And actually, we went through a big program review a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now. And as part of that, our academic development team sort of worked on some guides for module conveners to try to help them with rethinking their modules. And I wrote a Talis guide as part of that when you're thinking about engaging readings and engaging reading lists. So we have, as part of our training list, some kind of nice examples of how to scaffold a list, how to use importances, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's not enforced, but we do try to talk about it a lot. Okay, there's a question there from Jay. What are your department engagement rates with your reading lists? That is a good question. They do vary. You can see I'm looking at a different screen. So because we have the hierarchy upload show us every single module, and then it's just whether or not somebody creates a list that goes along with that module. It isn't perfect, but I think it is indicative of the schools that tend to want to engage. I think our overall engagement is something like 65% if you look at the entire number of the whole number of modules and the number of lists attached to those. There are certain schools where my colleagues in the liaison team are continuing to kind of ask about creating reading lists and getting that message across, and others where we have almost 100% coverage, and the academics are happy to have their lists in there and they are updating as well. So it is a mixed bag. We are still working on it. One of the things I'd love to do is be able to get a list of the modules that are supposed to have reading lists, because my suspicion is that of the sort of 40% that don't have a list at the moment, they don't all actually recommend readings. So it's slightly unfair, but that's something we're still kind of working on because we don't have that information reliably from the schools in a sort of bulk format yet. I hope that answers that in some way. How many library staff are involved in our rollover?
3 core
Yeah,
staff. Just the 3 of us, really.
just the 3 of us.
And then, to be fair, collections then do certain things like dealing with all the referred digitized content, referred requests that come out of that. But yeah, it's 3.
Yeah. So the folks who would usually deal with digitizations once they've been gone through the referral process, if a scan needs making, is that team within collections who would help to deal with the referrals after our digitized content rollover takes place. Same with reviews. Once some academics are very good and do things early, and then the review is kind of ready to go, even though we're not quite ready yet for them, but that will get picked up, and it's that team who do that. But the core rollover is really that little Talis group. So it's 3, maybe 4 of us. We crack on with that in June and July. The question, what percentage of lists are not attached to nodes?
Of academic lists, I mean, it should be 0. And it certainly is when we get to this point of the year and we make sure that things that should be attached to nodes are, and things that we don't really care or not if they're attached to nodes, like practice lists or lists that are being used for other purposes. Like we have we keep resource lists for other things like well-being and things like that as well for students to use. But for academic lists, we keep it as close to zero attached to hierarchy nodes as possible throughout the year, and especially at this time.
Just trying to run a quick all lists report that's telling me that it can find 11, but I can see that some of those are things that have been created for the new academic year, so it's probably lower than that. Things that don't have where the hierarchy code is empty. So if it's a training list or just a sort of generic resource list, we will try to attach it to a node, but that node won't be a module node. It will be a department node, so the library, or a school node, so Institute of Education, for example. So they should be attached to something, but it's just the module node itself that we would then use for rollover. So that should just be academic lists.
Yeah, it really is us trying to keep to those principles for academic lists that really enables how we do our rollover, which is why we do so much cleanup before updating the hierarchy and after updating the hierarchy. Yeah, whereas before, I think, before we came up with this process, we had all kinds of lists everywhere, in all kinds of time periods, all kinds of different modules, and it was very much hard to keep track and very messy. So, yeah, those principles definitely help.
I've just spotted a question from Julie in the chat. How many members in our liaison team? So there are 13 individuals, but that's not FTE. So we have a job share. We have some part-time staff as well. We each have 2 schools at least that we liaise with. So we are going out and trying to encourage the academics in those schools to use Talis, and we will contact them directly, as I say, if they're new, when we get an email to say that they've started at the university, then we'll kind of put that together with the liaison librarian who does that. Don't know if you can see that question in the chat, Ian.
No, sorry, I can't.
That might be the bit where it broke up slightly. Be useful to know how we do the matching for the tab C spreadsheet that you showed us.
Sure. This spreadsheet is built out of an all list report for all of our rolled over lists. You'll know that if you've got multiple nodes on multiple hierarchy nodes attached to a list, they'll appear in one column, separated by semicolons. So I'll use the text to columns function to split those out into individual columns. And again, for each of those, do the same for the student numbers as well. Takes a bit of messing around. I haven't written a macro or a VBA script to do this. I don't know if I will. But essentially, this is conditional formatting, which just enables the... So this is a little bit messier than it needs to be, but we're using the count if formula to match whatever's in that column to what's in the courses code column. You can certainly email me, contact me if you want to know a bit more about this, because it's probably quite hard to convey over. And as conditional formatting in Excel is one to do, the rules have got a little bit messy here. So, but essentially, yeah, we're using conditional formatting to highlight those, and this will run on each of these hierarchy columns, which is why if we scroll down, we'll find this code in the course list. We'll find this code in the course list. If we go down here, we won't find this code in our courses list, which is useful for us because we'll know to add that in. Hopefully that briefly answers the question, but do contact me if you want to know more about that.
Thanks everyone for your questions. Don't know if there are any other questions from anyone or any comments. I will just put our emails in the chat in case you do have any questions, because I realise they're not on this question slide for you. So yeah, do get in touch if you do have questions. We'll see if we can answer them. But yeah, thanks everyone.
No, thank you both. That was really, really interesting, really informative. I'm sure you will get quite a lot of follow-up emails with further questions or details as requested. So that's great. If anybody else has a question, now is a great time to pop it in the chat, pop your hand up just before we round this off. But otherwise you do have both Ian and Kim's contact information, so I think they'd be thrilled to get some follow-up questions and some insights. Great. Well, if nobody does have any other questions, then we'll round this off, give everybody sort of between 5 and 10 minutes back, prepare for your afternoons. But thank you both again so much for running this webinar for us. It's been, like I said, really interesting, really informative, so thank you very much. For those that couldn't attend, obviously we have done the recording, which they'll be able to catch up with, so you may find you get some more questions after that as well. And we will probably pop this up on our YouTube channel in due time, and also onto our Talis Aspire support pages, if that's okay with you both as well, so that more people can access and find it and learn from you. So I think that just leaves me to say thank you very much for coming along, and do feel free to get in touch with Kim and Ian or with Talis support if you do have anything else that you want to know, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Thank you again.
So
thanks everyone.
Bye.